I am your main connection to the switchboard of souls. I'm the magic man.
Good morning, Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, not what you don't. Tape deck alert. Tape deck alert. Here's what's happening.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm back. Happy Hanukkah. This is actually a candle back here, but you can't see it because the crappy camera on my Mac monitor, you know. Nothing much I can do about that. But anyway, as the title says, this show has nothing to do with Godzilla. And we might as well just jump right into the news. The absurdity, like I said, I've said this so many times, that the word absurdity has become meaningless, right? It's the same with, when you use the word,
This is insane.
Because everything is insane. Everything's absurd. The other one is surreal is another one. It's like, it's a meaningless word these days because it's all surreal. So I looked at the news today. I read the news today. Oh boy, as the Beatles said. And so I look at this thing and, we've been following, and the only reason I bring this up, there's like there's two reasons why I bring that up, and whatever that thing was.
Really funny. Really funny.
I don't know. The human body on a live show. So the only reason I bring this up is because, man, let me get rid of, I'm sorry about that. Do some, they call, they call it something. I have no idea what they call it. What do they call it?
Really funny. Really funny.
Housekeeping is what they do. Anyway, I bring this up because, we've been talking about this Omicron thing, and, I wanted to follow up with it. So it's the third day, I kind of got the scoop on it. I brought it to you, broke the story at 3 a.m. a couple of days ago. And then we followed up yesterday with some talk, and so this is the final follow up to where it starts to go over the deep end. So the South African doctor, I'm reading from Google News, and this is CNBC, all right, reporting. So this isn't me, okay? Just so we get that clear to the algorithms, analytics, or if they assign a personal we need to sign in a personal monitor on that guy. Anyway, South African doctor who first spotted the Omicron COVID variant explains the symptoms. Okay, that's CNBC. And they, and so if you go down to Reuters, right, News, this is all the same stuff that's on CNBC and the rest of Omicron variant patients have in quotation marks very mild symptoms, doctor says. Okay, that's what the South African doctor says. Yahoo News, South African doctor says patients with Omicron variant have in quotation marks very mild symptoms. Right. And then The Guardian, the Observer view on the, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then Bloomberg, Omicron is a warning. We are nowhere through with the COVID-19 pandemic. Beware. What the fuck are they talking? You see the contradiction. The South African doctor who first spotted it, right? The people studying this thing, right? First on the ground, very mild symptoms. Very mild symptoms. Reported by Reuters, CNBC, Yahoo News. These are not exactly right-wing type of organizations, or anti-vaxxers, right? And then Bloomberg comes along because I don't know, because he wanted the city locked down for some reason because he's buying up real estate or he's taking advantage of the situation. I mean, I don't know. I'm just, throwing that out there. Omicron is a warning that we are nowhere through with the COVID-19 pandemic. What should be added to that is that has been lasted for over 2.5 fucking years, and people are wearing bandanas thinking they're protecting themselves. Japan, Israel bar foreigners as WHO flags global risk from Omicron. So just, you see, who what do you believe? Yeah, it's no wonder people have lost their freaking minds. It's like I was hearing somebody talking the other day about, the patheticness of 2-year-old children walking around with a mask on or their parent giving them a mask. This thing's been around for 2 years. These children, you say even somebody 3 years old, because, a child the first 6 months or so, they don't know what the heck's going on. Hardly. So like these 2 and 3-year-olds are, they're making them wear masks and stuff, and they see all these people walking around with masks off. That's the world that they imagine that being the natural way and natural order of the world. Right? It's like, it's something out of like a Twilight Zone.
This is a nightmare. Must be a nightmare.
Do you remember that one Twilight Zone? If you have to be, have watched Twilight Zone. There was one where there's like real beautiful girl, and she was all wrapped up like she was getting some kind of facial. She had some facial, facial surgery, right? And so as they took the bandages off, they never showed the doctors or the nurses. All they ever showed was like, everything but the doctors and nurses' faces. And then the bandage and this woman in bandages. And so then finally it came to the point where, because it was so horrific that they were trying to change this face. And so they pull the bandages off, and she looks like something like that blonde Ellie on the Beverly Hillbillies. In fact, it might have even been her, or was somebody that was like the kind of face, that classic blonde, perfectly, formed, female face, right? And then the doctors, and then it was, the nurses, everybody pulls back. And then it finally then shows the faces of the doctors and the nurse, and they're these like distorted, pig-faced type of creatures. And she goes out in a hallway, and then there's some guy who looks like Jethro, from the Beverly Hillbillies. Might as well stick with that thing, the classic, jaw, male, all American male type of, farm boy, whatever. I don't know. And, and so what they were trying to do, obviously it's like typical Serling. He was trying to make, get the point across. Like, it doesn't matter what you look like, everyone is beautiful, that kind of thing. It was the way it was back then. The song by B.J. Thomas, everything is beautiful in its own way. And that's true. I'm not trying to put, but the point of the matter is that these poor children, their first glimpse, their early years, their formative years, because that's when you talk to, you hear like child psychologists talk about that more stuff happens in those early years as far as like what's going to affect the rest of your life, and how you perceive the world, and all sorts of things, your self-esteem, everything, all kinds of things. Because your brain is like a sponge at that point. It's just, it's trying to figure stuff out. We're born not, we're not like born like a horse, the horse drops and, fumbles a little bit to get on its thing and then starts running side by side with its mother, and it's a horse, just it's a baby horse. Takes a few days till it gets its, sea legs, horse legs, and it's fine. And most animals are like that. But humans, they're born as these little blobs, and they have this brain of ours has to somehow develop, into a personality, right? Or how we and we it's a learned behavior of how to function within. In other words, we're adapting to the situation, the society, or whatever we're into. So if a child is born into a world where everyone wears masks, no one hugs them, everyone avoids contact, right? And everyone is watching the TV in fear. Omicron is a warning that we are nowhere near through with the COVID-19 pandemic. This is nothing short of torment and and it's going to cause lifelong damage. And here's the sad part about it. Because this has been going on for like 2 years now, basically. I mean, the thing has been around for 2.5 years, according to the intelligence agencies who've gone on record saying that. They knew of it in the summer of 2019. I've said that many times on this show. All right. And then we had Event 201 in the fall following that, which was to deal with it because they already knew it. That was no random event. All right. But it wasn't the Americans. Nancy Pelosi was out, come on down to Chinatown in like February or March of 2020. The mayor of New York is, come on to New York. It's a hell of a town, right? Around February and stuff of 2020. And meanwhile, this thing was out in the summer of 2019. An easy, 6 months, and with some of these people up to 8 months, they were still, pretending like it was nothing. And maybe it was nothing in that, we don't know anything anymore. So I just brought this up. And then, of course, here's the funny one, too. So speaking, the Big F. The Big F fires back at Cruz over COVID claims because Cruz basically, I guess, is like Rand Paul said to the F guy, and then the F guy he told him he should be prosecuted. And the F guy fires back. I should be prosecuted? What happened on January 6th, Senator? And my question is, what did happen on January 6th? Right? Some guy with horns. They go into a place that's owned by the American people. The people's Nancy Pelosi, like months prior to that, said this is a people's house, and it is the people's house. And hey, by the way, Nancy, we pay your salary, right? I always get a kick out of that, and I've told this story before. I told everything before because I've done like 500 videos. But, it's a flow of consciousness. Let's put the pieces together, connect the dots, whatever you want to call it. And so it's the people's house. We pay their salaries. You ever see these places where it says U.S. government property, do not enter? Who is the U.S. government? The American people. At least we were, according to the Congress. U.S. government property, right? And whenever when they want to hide something from us, they say it's for national security purposes, right? That's like a funny one. National security. Yeah, it's great. You got these things you can hide of. Oh, and anytime someone says something that they don't like, then it's a conspiracy theory, right? And that's it. That's the two big lines. We can't release that or tell you about that or give you the details because it would, it would affect national security. And besides, you're dealing with what you're talking about is just a conspiracy theory anyway. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And then you got down here, Biden to provide update Monday on U.S. response to Omicron variant. Biden moves to reassure weary Americans as fears rise about new COVID variant. CNN, 4 hours ago. The Biden to provide update was 8 hours ago. Okay. Now, the Yahoo News 16 hours ago, okay, was quoting the African doctor, says patients with Omicron have very mild symptoms. Reuters News 13 hours ago, Omicron variant patients have very mild symptoms, doctor says. Okay. And of course, the CNBC thing is meaningless because they don't use the quotations that they don't actually quote the doctor in the headline there, but they explain that the doctor did come out and talk. And both Reuters and Yahoo, like I say, which are not considered fringe news organizations by any means. Reuters is the one that many of the networks basically quote. In fact, the Mr. F down there below, who should be prosecuted, there's a Reuters quote there. So both The Hill and CNN, Johnny-come-latelys, right, are still pushing, this idea. So, I was concerned. I said, hey, this may be it. This may be game over when I first heard about it. Right? I mean, gain of function and bioweapons lab and all that stuff. Makes sense. I mean, it's a line of thinking, something you can follow. But, apparently not. According to Reuters, 13 hours ago, Omicron variant patients have very mild symptoms, doctor says. South African doctor who first spotted the Omicron COVID variant. According to Yahoo News, South African doctor says patients with Omicron variant have very mild, in quotation, symptoms. All right? So, I just want to follow up with that because this is like the third show in which I've mentioned this, and I don't want to, like I say, I sounded the alarm when the alarm needed to be sounded and was sounded, but obviously, clearly now, anything that Biden or Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, or some other idiots, morons, come up with is just fear-mongering. So the candle's like the first candle of, I don't have a menorah in the background. It's all this Christmassy holiday. Remember, it's the holiday season, right? And so, holiday season includes, midnight last night. Light that first candle. That's the first candle of Hanukkah. But got no room for a menorah here. I burned the house down. I'm sorry. At least on this set. So let's move on with the show. And I'm trying to fix the setup here so that I'm making individual sounds, groupings, so that when we if it's a weekend, it's a weekend. When it's not a weekend, I can just say
The Weather Watch forecast
and give you the weather as opposed to saying it's a weekend weather. So it is Monday, the 29th of November, in case you're living under a cave. It's currently 4:35 a.m. in the Eastern Time. I'm situated somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic states. And this is the most recent satellite loop from NOAA, the CONUS Low Earth Orbit satellite. So what you're seeing is pretty much what's happening, has happened within the past hour or so. And the trends are pretty easy to follow. That southern wave of clouds, air mass seems to be being defeated now by a more northwesterly flow. You see that? Almost more of like a jet stream type of thing, So there's still, over Mexico, you can see waters coming off the Pacific into Mexico. But you see the Gulf, how the clouds are kind of moving down into the Gulf. And that the clouds, along hugging, like going from Florida, hugging, that would normally be hugging the former United States East Coast. You see how they're just going like left to right, but they're getting a little further away from the coast as they go, right? And then there's like that spin up north that's it's almost as if they're being pushed away from the continental United States by this something from the north. And then you can see that what's probably lake effect snow. In fact, we're having some here right now, even though I'm, far from the lakes. But you can see how it dips all the way down to, into eastern Ohio, West Virginia, northern Maryland, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, and basically, New England is kind of almost going to be covered. This time of year, New England, expect anything. And the Pacific Northwest is where everything's like kind of piling in up there. And there's still some remnants of those. Remember we were talking, if you watch this show, there was these weird clouds that just don't seem to want to move. And you can see there's one spot there that like it's as if it's being wind sheared, but it still won't go away. But for a while there, it was an upright, vertical length that it, extended up into Canada. So I don't know what the hell that was, or it still is. So judging from this map, it's pretty quite easily, you can tell your major cities or where you are, your location by the brightness of the lights. The biggest and brightest lights are the major cities. And so, figure it out yourself. As far as my neck of the woods, say the Mid-Atlantic states, currently outside my studio, it's 30 degrees, 2 degrees below freezing, below 0 Celsius. And we're looking for a high of like 34 today, snow. 28 overnight. Tuesday, 70% chance of snow. 37 is the high. 32 or 0 degrees Celsius is the low. And then the rest of the week, we might bump up into the 40s, 43, but overnight still in the 30s. Thursday, there's a 50% chance of rain. Not looking forward to that. I found some roof tiles on the side of my house, which means the wind we had the other day blew another tile off, which means I may have a new leak popping up somewhere. So I guess I won't know till Thursday till I see where that water's coming out through, and I have to put a cat litter box under there. And 36 for the low on Thursday. And then Friday, chance of thunderstorms, probably just some rain as well. Again, now getting back into the 30s and the overnight in the 30s. So, we pretty much here, if you're anywhere in the northern tier of the U.S., it's for all practical purposes, even though it's not technically winter. It's winter. So you can expect more of the same. So the coming weeks, there's not going to be a December thaw, It's pretty much cold, and you're going to see flurries, and depending on your elevation, and how close you are to, say, water like the, lake effect snow, whether or not you get any serious accumulations. And basically,
The Weather Watch forecast.
and that's that. And for those of you following Bitcoin, I really don't care about it anymore, but I thought I'd bring up this chart. Yes, I usually put up just the daily charts. Yesterday we had the 5-day chart. Now today we're going to look at the 1-month chart here. And as you can see, that where there was a peak around November 8th, 9th, somewhere around that area, that we're up to 57 again from 54. So there's been a rise. But generally speaking, if someone were to look at this chart, you would say that the trend is downward, even though it's a little bit higher right now than it was yesterday and the day before. And of course, it was the weekend. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen. But, people are playing Bitcoin. They're playing the market. And, if you have the stomach for that, or if that's your game, you feel like a day trader type of person, then yeah, good luck and all the best. But if you're one of those people that's hoping, say the thing's going to go up to 140, or as Max Kaiser said, it's going to be 1 million, right? You know who Max Kaiser is? Watch the Kaiser Report sometime. He's a character. But yeah, I don't know. It just, all I see, and all anyone who's been following this show has seen, is that this thing is volatile. And unless you're like selling on the high, unless you got a lot of it, and you're selling some when it's high and buying when it's low. But when something's in the $50,000 to $60,000, a pop range, that's a game for major players. It's not a game for, though you can buy fractional units of that, and there are apps you can get that allow that. I don't particularly have one, but I'm aware of them, that there are some. So you may want to investigate something like that if you want to play that game. So I guess you could jump in with smaller amounts of money and just play it. But I think that's what the ebbs and flows are all about. It's trading. It's just basically people who are playing the market, like same way they play with stocks. All right, so we got into that. Now, La Palma, according to the official Spanish site, their latest press release, they're saying that things are slowing down. They've reopened the airport, and they've relaxed some of the bans, whatever. And they're already talking about taking care of, governments talking about doing something for people who were displaced, because thousands of people lost their homes. So, at this point, who knows? A couple of days of easing off doesn't necessarily mean that this thing's over. But that's what they're saying. And so I'll just tell you what they're saying. So there's still some activity, obviously, going on there. There's still lava flowing, but things have slowed down, and one of those fissures has stopped or something along that line, according to the report. And this is a official photo put out by the Spanish press. Now, back to last but not least of our daily features, it being Hanukkah and all that, then maybe, I guess it's in order to think about my song, the worst Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa song ever written or sung. Add it to your collection. You know? Get your voice assistant to play it. It's ridiculous. If you don't know what it sounds like, let me take the song. Hanukkah Kwanzaa song ever written. So,
ugly sweaters and ex-girlfriends, candles and crappy family dinners and arguments.
Anyway, let me just zip through that to give you a feel for it without getting a copyright strike for my own song. It's ridiculous, but it happens. You know?
Go ahead and shoot. You'll be doing me a favor. Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
Anyway. So,
hey, it's me. How you doing, man?
Another opening, another show in Philly, Boston, and what's the last one? Philly, Boston, and you fill in the line. Another opening, another show in Philly, Boston, and and it's a force, one of those forced Broadway rhymes. It's of little consequence. We don't care. All right, so let's get into this thing. On the title of the show is just Flow of Consciousness, and for some reason the date is 289, which doesn't make sense. It's supposed to be 29 November. So anyone who had something, did receive something in their mail, it says 289. I don't know how I missed that one. This show has nothing to do with Godzilla. Pardon my drinking. I still have a couple of these things to get rid of. These fake diet citrus green teas that contain more unpronounceable chemicals and what have you than green tea or anything that would resemble real citrus. But isn't that the way it always is? And speaking of Godzilla, let's not forget Boozilla and the old Yingling Lager, which a hometown beer. I no longer live there, but Yingling's from my hometown. Was a promotional thing I made for a club one time. Anyway, so yeah, let's think about this stuff, the absurdity of everything that's going on right now and how we deal with it. How do we go forward? What do we do? These children that are being tormented. You can see the candle now. You can see almost tell it's a candle. There you go. A certain little flicker there. But all right, so you've got children that their minds are being totally tormented and warped. Maybe up to the age 5, right? Because, kids are in their own world the first couple of years. Terrible twos, they're just running around like lunatics, right? So suddenly, by the time they're 3-ish, they're looking at the world outside of running around the house in a terror. And me, that's mine. It's like once a kid learns that word, Mine. And so, once they're realizing that, they get through that, they look around and there's a bigger world out there. And all these humans, so I see. So like that Twilight Zone, the normal state is distortion, are these distorted, contorted faces, people wearing masks, people keeping distances from each other, people not being able to go outside or go to a park, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I guess I would reckon that it's possible up to the age of 5, these children's, their minds are already basically like, accepting this as, what human life is about, what society is about, what this is how it is in the world they were born into, right? And that's going to be very hard to erase. Now, I've also watched, I'm a YouTuber guy, I don't sit around and watch TV. I don't have TV. I got rid of it. And I've watched many child psychologists and just psychologists in general speak of this, like I was saying earlier, these formative years, right? And, once that brain, gets established, those synapses, those pathways are formed. It's very hard to change that. I mean, that is the developmental stage, of the personality that's going to, arise and be carried with and define that person for the rest of their life. Now, that's a generalization, of course, and it's possible that good parenting, could intervene and could explain things. But if the parents themselves are also like scared shitless, well, the child is going to detect that. And that's only going to make the situation worse. And when everyone's watching, because this is a world of watch, a world of memes, a world of social media, and it's all fear-mongering, right? That this, these monsters are going to, kill us if we don't, But what these child psychologists have said, and I'm not going to talk, this isn't a story about psychology. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just going to touch on this briefly, and then we'll move on. That, and this, and that this is a warping of their minds. They don't know any better. And the idea of this, like, not being able to have physical contact, their aunt, we just passed the Thanksgiving holiday, and we're in Hanukkah season now, all right? And then we'll be in Advent and Christmas season, right? Kwanzaa, if you will, okay? This is the holiday season where people and families get together and friends. And if so here you take this child, this 3-year-old, 4-year-old, whatever, 5-year-old maybe, perhaps. And so there's a family dinner, and aunt comes over, uncle, grandmother, whatever, close friends of the family. And, what normally would be, oh, grandma's here, and go run over and give grandma a hug, right? Come over and give your grandpa a hug, right? Well, that's not going on. First of all, grandpa might have walked in the house wearing a mask, right? Like, you know what I mean? Sometimes, you have to look at the perception of the world from innocence more so than from, from our perspective, people who've been through, all kinds of things and stuff, and have seen, and know that the government and media are just, full of shit, right? They're looking out for themselves. Once they're elected by the people, and once they take the money, our tax money, as their salaries, they somehow think that they are like better than us, or they are elite now suddenly. It's like, well, wait a second. You're put in that position by us, and we pay your salary. Now, granted, you're now multimillionaires because you do insider trading and all these illegal things that you don't even get your hand slapped for doing. But the fact of the matter is, you're civil servants. You're servants of the people, paid by the people. Well, I don't need your money because we're multimillionaires, because we did illegal stock trades, insider trading, and we got away with it. Right? If you don't know that, then I'm not talking to you. Right? Change the channel. Of course, there's nobody watching right now. 0 viewers. Which I was talking with a gentleman yesterday about that. I had some ideas on that. And the thing about it is, like I've often said before, at any given time around the world, there are millions of people, like millions and millions. This is like a billion. YouTube has something like 1 billion subscribers. I don't know. Let's look at that number, because let's not talk out. I don't want to talk out the ass. All right. I'll bring you along for the ride. Let me get my screen capture thing on here. Properties. Wish I didn't have to go through this thing. Let's see. I think, yeah, that ought to do it. It's just weird how this works. Okay, so let's do a search. All right. How many people are on YouTube? Okay. According to this, and you should be able to see this, I just need to double do it. Okay. I know that did a weird little flicker for you, but I was double checking something. 2.29 billion. All right. So 2.25 billion plus people are on the YouTube platform. 2 billion are on WhatsApp, 1.3 billion on Instagram, and 1.3 billion on Messenger. All right. Now, and that's coming from Google itself, right? So these are Google numbers. 10 YouTube statistics you need to know in 2021. Let's see what that is. Hopefully we don't, let's see. Monthly active YouTube users, 2.3 billion. We know that. Second most popular social platform. Okay. YouTube is the second most popular search engine after Google. 1 billion people use it to search for stuff. YouTube in numbers. YouTube is localized in more than 100 countries and available in 80 languages. 1 billion, okay. A billion hours of videos on YouTube and generated billions of views every day. Businesses use it, okay. YouTube users prefer mobile over desktop. Yeah, we know that. People discover new products on YouTube. Yeah. 720,000 hours of video uploaded to YouTube daily. 500 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute worldwide. Okay. Most popular channels among U.S. videos. 90% of U.S. digital video viewers use YouTube. All right, so people who are looking for video. And then there's a summary of what we just saw. So what I'm trying to get at here is simple. If there's 2.25 billion users, and this is global, worldwide, all right, that means that at any given time, all right, any given time, there's probably at least hundreds of millions of people on YouTube. Okay? I mean, you know, people half the world's, you know, in darkness and people are sleeping or whatever. People are working and all that other stuff. I'm going to try to get my chair in a position. So you have the live category on YouTube. Now, I know that, you know, like I said, I was talking with someone yesterday, and I'm just pulling up my email right now. And, of course, it has that 289 on it. I can't believe it. So somehow that... But I could see it says, now live on your channel, ROCKFLUX Live. All right. Flow of consciousness, blah, blah, blah. All right, so I got a notification on my other account because I'm a subscriber, that it's there. Now, but if you look at the live, you know, what's live on YouTube, this show isn't showing up. All right. And of course, like everything else, if someone even searches for like, what's live now? What morning shows are, you know, people are looking for this kind of stuff. Who's talking about, you know, this, that, the other? That what will show up on the first several pages of YouTube, and it's like, you know how it is in search. You know, 90-some% of the people, when they do a search on Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever they use, you know, even YouTube, they don't dig, you know, you're not going to sit there and page through page, unless you're really, really looking for something. Most people just want something. And so what comes up by them shadow banning you, putting you back into the millions of, you know, I don't know, I should have pointed it out, but there were like 5 million search results for when I clicked in, like how many people are on YouTube. 5 million results came up. Well, who the hell's going to look through 5 million results? We didn't. We looked at what they told us, the number, because in this instance, YouTube is, you know, a subsidiary of Google, Alphabet, or however they structure that company now. And then I clicked on one of the other links below because it looked legitimate, right? You know, it didn't look like it was an ad, you know, just one of these like about.com fake sites. And that's what most people do. Now, sometimes it's pretty obvious there's ads at the top or ads at the side, and you just say to heck with that. And you might go to the second page because the first page is just, you could tell it's bullshit. And maybe in some rare instance, if you're really looking for something and the second page doesn't have it, you might go to the third. You know, that's just, you know, this is, you know, remember, it's common sense when you have to think about this. But when they take it, something like me, because of the subject matter, right? Because I've had videos before, you know, I got into this show this year these 300 plus shows, that I've taken this morning show and into the direction of just social criticism, right? Criticizing that politics has become pop culture, that these individuals involved in that pop culture, there's a cult of personality around them, right? And I keep jackhammering these same ideas in every show, and then pulling up documentation or looking at the news to point out how ridiculously absurd and insane they are. But as I said in opening, these words like absurd, insane, and surreal don't mean anything anymore to people. Half the people probably still don't even know what it means. But the other half of the people, they're common words, so they don't carry any weight, right? When you say this is ridiculous, it carries no weight anymore. Whereas, maybe 20, 30 years ago, if someone said, that particular newscaster's insane or absurd. It's absurd, that newscast. This is ridiculousness. You'd think of an MTV show or something called Ridiculousness or something. So the fact remains that programs like this that are newer and haven't developed a following based on for some other reason. You could call, like, I've been on YouTube since the beginning, but, and I have some associated channels, in other words, this is my ROCKFLUX channel, but I do have other channels. And like on my Adverteria channel, which used to be the agency, I used to run an advertising agency. I won't do that anymore. Closed it down. But I mean, the site's still there, and I still have the website. But we used to cover expeditions to the North Pole, South Pole, Himalayas, the Amazon, and all that stuff. That's why I can talk about that stuff firsthand. So when I get into these climate crisis, fear-mongering things, I'm talking to you because I've been involved in, directly in these things, and I have video footage, that and was doing live over the internet, on the ground broadcasts, webcasts, whatever you want to call them, from these remote locations. So I know what the Amazon looks like. I know the Earth's not flat. I know what the South Pole looks like, right? All right. I know what the North Pole looks like. I know what the Himalayas look like, right? I know that the South Pole, but the magnetic South Pole has actually left the continent of Antarctica now. So, you have a geographic South Pole, right? But the magnetic South Pole is no longer not only not at the South Pole, so to speak, which is an imaginary thing, but has left the continent. And it's the same with the North. It has migrated. So we're in the middle of something called the pole shift, which some people just really will not accept. And these, which will have devastating effects on the planet and are part and parcel in what the climate alarmists are blaming on man-made CO2, which is like, there's a 0.004 CO2. It's a trace gas in the atmosphere. And I'll jackhammer this just one more time. The atmosphere of this planet is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 0.9% argon. That means it's 99.9% nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. And so out of that 0.1%, there are these trace gases such as CO2, methane, water vapor, and other things. but they're trace gases. So 99.9% of the Earth's atmosphere is not, all caps, CO2. CO2 is 0.004% of the atmosphere. And it still is enough to give the trees and the plants and the crops, what they need to grow, to thrive. And in turn, particularly with the crops, to feed us. And in the case of all these trees and growth, to exhale oxygen that we need to breathe. So that trace gas 0.004 CO2 is actually responsible for our existence, in effect. We could go higher. All right? And besides, it's not man-made. That's this anyway. So we also have a weakened magnetic field, and we also have a thing in the sky. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but there's this thing up in the sky, and it's called the sun. And when it's out, it gives us light, and we get warm in the summertime. All right, and we get vitamin D from it. The plants, it's photosynthesis, and we kind of photosynthesize from it too. But for some reason, these climate scientists, they never look up in the sky. They don't know that there's a sun that basically is the primary contributor to the climate of the planet. So anyway, that's another thing that they're scaring kids with, right? So a child is born, a child is up to in these formative years today, in recent years, in the last, say 5 years or so, or more, when you throw in some of these other absurdities that they're putting in, shoving down kids. They think that there's some kind of climate crisis caused by, electricity. Basically electricity. Heating fuels, carbon-based fuels. So that we need to stop using natural gas and, refined oil products. One of the byproducts, which is plastic, which would be like, we're a carbon-based civilization. Not only are we a carbon-based life form, and we're a carbon-based civilization. Just look around you how many things have plastic in them. Plastic comes out of the refining process of crude oil to make it into various products. It was discovered, I've said this before, it was discovered actually originally years and years ago accidentally. But that's that whole line in The Graduate, where he pulls him, one of the older guys pulls Dustin Hoffman character aside and goes, plastics, right? Because that's when they were, that's as this industry was growing, it was like, hey, we have all this stuff. And we can for some reason it's moldable and malleable and stuff. And the world became plastic. And like with our climate here in these former United States, we've done things like these Energy Star, appliances that use less energy. We've put filters and all sorts of things on our emissions, on our cars, in factories, right? We've limited and nearly eliminated pollution in cities that at one point used to have a level of smog over top of them. China still has that, right? But we pretty much don't. And, we cleaned up our acts. And even with the plastics, we've gotten rid of those certain types of things that used to be put in that were potentially carcinogen or could have had, certain side effects, health side effects. So, this country's done as good as it possibly could to clean the air, water, and make sure the materials that we use are as safe as possible. And we do our fair share of recycling as much as is possible. But with a population of 330 million people plus, you constantly need new product. So, for example, as I pointed out here, even though this bottle has the recycling symbol on it, this is not a recycled bottle. This is telling you that it's pretending it is. It's giving you a website that says how2recycle.info. It's telling you to recycle this. All right? But in that case of that bottle was created fresh and new because of demand. And so you have, and like I say, I bring up like the soft drink industry, which is heavily reliant on plastic, carbon-based product, all right, produced, all right. Now, some people will say, well, people shouldn't be drinking on soft drinks anyway. They're no good for them. And, you're probably right about that. However, all these vegans and vegetarians who go to the grocery store or these health food stores, or they go to these, GNC type places. I don't know if they still have that chain or not, but places where they buy vitamins and all that stuff. What do the smoothies and the kombucha, whatever the hell you call it, and the pomegranate juice and your nuts, right? And your vitamin bottles, right? And your organic vegetables, fresh vegetables. I bought a bag of broccoli the other day. A bag of broccoli. It's a plastic bag. The smoothies are in plastic bottles. Okay? See, they don't think about that. They don't tell the kids that. Right? It's plastics everywhere. And it's like, well, yeah, recycle them. Yeah, recycle them. But we got 330 million people in this country alone. All right? There's constantly a need for new plastics. I mean, they're redoing the sewer pipes, and they're these plastic pipes. They're not cast iron or made out of like clay or some kind, you know what I mean? Some kind of, the way they used to. The previous pipes, the reason that our infrastructure is failing is because it just got too old. A lot of these gas lines, sewer lines, water lines were buried under the ground 100 plus years ago. In some cases, 120 or more years ago. That's how old some of these pipes are. And they literally lasted that long. Right? But on my street, they've been at it. They'd keep digging the thing up every 3 years. Because I don't know, the pipes, the seals don't last, or whatever. People don't know what they're doing, or the contractors are intentionally like doing slipshod work so they get the contract again. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's nothing like the work that was done by those mass migration of people that built this country from like the 1880s on, through the turn of the century and the early part of the 20th century, who, again, by the way, are most people's grandparents or great-grandparents who weren't even in this country during the Civil War, the slavery earlier, and certainly not that 1619 project, which was just a bunch of Brits, or whatever. Go after them. We had the founding fathers had a revolutionary war against those idiots. All right? And those who have bloodlines that go back to that, for the most part, are now the elites and own this country, and are the ones who are trying to make the common man who came here and built this country with their hands, picks and shovels, right? Make them out to be like some kind of, demons. And it's like, we have no skin in that game. That's the Rockefeller melons. That's the whole, that's you, that's the power brokers, JP Morgan, all these big companies. Those people have been, those are the ones, not us. We're the ones, we did the heavy lifting. We created this. We literally built this country with our hands, right? And heavy equipment that ran on carbon-based fuels. And to fix this, and what they were doing in front of my house, and they're, and this so-called infrastructure bill, Build Back Better, is all going to require carbon-based fuel, because these things don't run on electric. They never told these kids that kids say, well, we'll just need electric, and we'll get solar power and wind farms. Well, what they don't tell you about that is that at best you maybe get 12% of the energy, in an ideal situation from that sort of stuff. The amount of land that they take up and the energy it takes to produce those things is unbelievable. As far as, in other words, it requires carbon-based fuels to create wind turbines and solar panels, and to forge steel, and then cranes to raise these things, to make the concrete, right? Concrete trucks, and the transportation to get these things to those levels. You can't do that on battery-operated vehicles. And if you did have battery-operated vehicles that could carry that weight, which we don't have and won't have, but say we did, those batteries would have to be charged. The electricity would have to come from somewhere, and would have to come from where it comes from today, from natural gas, coal, carbon-based fuels. So when you're driving down the road in your electric car and you're thinking you're green, you're basically driving a car that's running on fracked gas and coal. And the person who's driving down the road with a traditional vehicle that's got its, that's basically not putting out any really serious emissions. It's got this catalytic converter and all this stuff. And we don't have leaded gas anymore, any of that stuff. So the person driving down with this other car next to the electric car is basically using refined petroleum product, and has basically most likely less of a carbon footprint than the electric vehicle.
This is really funny. Really funny. What do you mean I'm funny?
They just don't get it. But these kids, it's not a laughing matter for them, because these kids believe this shit. They think that they think electricity is like, oh. And then the ugliness of it, of these windmill farms that just ruined all of our landscape. They kill all these birds, and their maximum life expectancy is like 20 years. Right? There are already windmill graveyards, because this began, years ago, decades ago. They started to do this, particularly out west, California. And they're these graveyards. You could see pictures of them, because nobody wants to fix them or repair them. And to repair them requires carbon-based fuels. And you say, well, what do you mean? Well, you have to have these heavy cranes to lift them. You would have to replace these blades, right? remold this, re-pour the concrete, if you got to take the thing down because it's useless, it requires what's called heavy equipment, excavators, these jackhammers on the ends of these excavating machines and these cranes to hoist this stuff. And then big giant concrete trucks that weigh tons and tons. See, a battery can't handle that load. You understand? You could make a truck, and I know Elon Musk, he's got like his picture of his 18-wheeler. Yeah, you could make a truck and you could probably haul lettuce and tomatoes and some light things in an electric 18-wheeler. But you're not going to be able to transport a truck filled with refrigerators, washers, dryers, right? Or if you're talking about infrastructure, heavy generators, turbines, and different things that have to go to places. And again, it's this, limestone that makes concrete, and the process of doing that. Fire trucks with hook and ladders, and that can go up to the 16th floor and pump water up there to put out a fire. Heavy duty EMT equipment and ambulances that just weigh so much. Right? We don't tell the kids that. It's a carbon-based civilization. We're carbon-based life forms. And CO2 is a good thing. It's only a trace gas, but it's a good thing for the planet. It greens the planet, provides food, and gives us oxygen to breathe. And the sun is the major contributor to the Earth's climate. And that also affects, and we have a weakened magnetic field, which is, and when you have all these volcanoes going over, those are cooling the planet. And in the Atlantic circulation, which basically, used to be called the conveyor. They have a new acronym for it now, but it's the Atlantic conveyor, the thing that brings the warm air up, and the cool air down and circulates. And that's why England and, certain northern tier latitude countries are warmer than they technically should be for their location. And it all has to do with fresh water and salt water. So when fresh water comes in, blah, blah, blah. But, a lot of this stuff, like they discovered down in Antarctica, that, first they were talking, hey, parts of Antarctica are melting. Well, they discovered that a lot of that was geothermal, that was coming up from beneath the earth, was actually heating and melting, causing ice melt. It wasn't the atmosphere up top. I mean, to this day, if you go on to the continent of Antarctica, it's you get frostbite. Okay? Frostbite. And if you want to take I know a guy will, take you to the North Pole. There's expeditions. If you don't have the proper covering on yourself, you'll get frostbite. Right? Yes, there's some ice melt and, different things going on, but it's not man-made. All right? It's cycles. We have a thing, we have the similar thing like when we have axial tilt. All right? That gives us the seasons, And then there's a spinning of the earth, which we call precession, right? We go through this process, and sometimes there's a little wobble in there. But the whole idea is that there are these short cycles, solar cycles. There are grand cycles. And in many cases, from our standpoint, in recent, I would say recent history, when I mean recent, I mean we've been in a series of ice ages. We're in what's called an interglacial period, meaning that 12,000 years ago, there was like a mile or more of ice over New York City and over most of the northern tier of the U.S. All right. That's a fact, Jack. And as this ice melted, and when they found in areas like along the northern tiers, things still buried in ice, or underground, they found woolly mammoths and other creatures that went extinct literally in a day. And when they opened them up, inside their stomachs was undigested plants, food, meaning there was some flash frost, freeze. And what many people are talking about, that 12,000 year cycle, is a real thing. And we're right in it. And it's probably going to happen, unfortunately, within the next decade or two, next 2 decades. And it's so life, the cycle of life, people wonder, like, is this really a Goldilocks planet? And my answer lately has been no. Because we have a cycle of where we get about 12,000 years to where we rise to a point where we seem to master technology. All right. And like I was speaking about yesterday, I take Godzilla off there. But I mean, that's the whole idea. It's like the Godzilla monster is what the news is what the news media are, what the politicians are. It's the Godzilla monster. Though this show has nothing to do with Godzilla, right? Of course not.
Tony.
Anyway, I guess what I wanted to say was,
you're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And they're still going with this.
Your papers, please.
But now you can tell it's a candle. You could almost see the Great Solar Stuff logo above the Game Over cap over there under my Then What book, which you should still get, on ROCKFLUX.com. It's a good gift for the holidays, or it's something good thing for yourself to have. But yeah, this is Game Over, and a lot of people don't want to deal with that. I have no idea what that is. This program becomes more and more frustrating with me I get more and more frustrated with it every day. But yeah, it's Game Over. And that should be something that should bring us all together, I would think. And that we should try to have, this should be a golden era the next 10 or 20 years. Because in all likelihood, this thing is going to happen. I don't know. We may dodge a bullet, but you've got to watch Ben Davidson. You got to watch Doug Vogt, and watch them go through this stuff. I mean, Davidson has put together a whole series of videos, like a playlist, that goes through it, and it includes scientific papers, peer-reviewed papers, documents, and all the stuff. And he gives the arguments, and he plays the devil's advocate, which is kind of, I never really liked that phrase, but it suffices for for what I'm trying to talk about. And learn something. Learn about your life. And that's what we should be doing now. We should be realizing we might be standing on the precipice of our own extinction. Because in the past, these have all been near extinction level events. Life is very fragile. I mean, first of all, we're we're traveling through space. You know, like people don't even teach kids that. You know, we're traveling through, hurled, following the sun. You know, we're caught in this solar system. You know, we're being dragged through the sun, hurling through space at like incomprehensible speeds, which to me is like kind of a very bizarre thing to begin with. You know, it's even the Earth itself. It's spinning ridiculously fast. You don't notice it because there's this coincidence of, it's something like 24,000 miles, per minute, per second. I don't know what it is, but we have the 24-hour clock. And, so the way it works out is, in a nutshell, I explained this once before with some visuals, but just to give you the abbreviated version of it. The Earth is spinning so fast that you can't even imagine, that it's incomprehensible to the average person. But the reason we can't feel it is because the Earth is so big, and it's also approximately 24,000 miles, the girth of it, around the equatorial region, that coincides with our clocks and our time, so that in effect, if you ever looked at a minute hand on a clock, watched it, like a fairly big clock, you could see the second hand move, but you can't really notice. You have to really stare at the minute hand, and you really can't see it move. And so because of the Earth's size, the speed in which we're turning, that coincides with the same amount of miles of width that it is, that in effect, it seems to us, it's like a minute hand, because it's these weird coincidences. It's like the moon is like locked in this weird orbit with us, and one side always faces us, and that its size is approximately, the same size to give us a solar eclipse. There's all these really odd things, in science and physics and astrophysics that just, it's just like, you think about them sometimes, you go, it's so weird that they all just happen to work so perfectly, right? So it's like a clockwork, solar system, a clockwork planet, a clockwork universe. It's very interesting. Or another perspective is, it could be just our perception somehow that we've see these things as being a certain way, which gets back to what I was talking about with the children, that it's all we know is the idea of a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse, or the fact that the Earth's spin coincides with its size, and therefore we seem to be we can't necessarily detect it, though otherwise that speed is would like rip you to shreds, right? Very strange. But you grow up and you deal with this. I mean, it's like the amount of radiation, cosmic radiation, that's coming in through the planet at any given time. They talk about, being exposed too much to the sun, could cause skin cancer and things like that. But a little bit of exposure to the sun is necessary for human life, right? We need that vitamin D. It boosts our immune system, and it activates all kinds of other things. But what I'm saying about it is that it's all just seems too perfect, right? And these people, these World Economic Forum people, the Davos set, these elected politicians whose salaries we pay And the bureaucrats that they hire, like the big F guy mentioned in the, who should be prosecuted, they, it's like the picture over here with Howard Beale. They've meddled with the laws of nature, right? They're meddling with the laws of nature, natural law, so to speak, because there is only natural law, that which is, all right? All right, common sense, reality, things that we know, right? There is no such thing as man-made laws are not, what do you mean laws, right? And these people are meddling with the laws of nature. They're meddling with the way things are. They're saying, "Oh, we want to put something in the atmosphere to block the sun. We want to change the way your immune system works and you deal with disease and different things like that." Right? So we're going to tell you, take this, wear this, don't do this, do that. You see, they're meddling with the laws of nature. And what I meant by the sun and cosmic rays and our magnetic field and all that stuff is that we're like radiation creatures. We're being bombarded at any given time by a lot of radiation. And too much over the limit of the normal levels, right? They say, if you hear the term safe level of something. Well, what we consider a safe level, some other species, some other alien species would might just burn up, right? So I say this isn't really the Goldilocks zone. I think that's a mistake that astronomers make when they look for life on other worlds. Excuse me. Because our civilizations rise during these interglacial periods, and then they get wiped out into near extinction. And the few people that survive by happenstance, whatever it is, in caves or just because they're in a certain area, and then they discover, excuse me, like wheezing or something. They discover these things like the Sphinx and the Serapeum and the pyramids and these other ancient structures and texts left in caves and clay pots or something. But I mean, whatever, but from, not even from 2,000 years ago, but I'm talking about stuff that may well have been left from 24,000, 32,000, 72,000, 100,000 years ago. And people don't want to accept that there's been this approximately 12,000 year cycle that through anthropology and archaeology we can prove, even through ice cores and things like that. And with every year we're discovering more and more evidence supporting this. But at this point, it's not up for grabs, because we definitely know that the last one, the Younger Dryas period, that happened. That there was this flash freezing of animals, and then there was like a sudden melt. And it was a catastrophic event, and ocean levels rose, like 400 feet or something, destroying all the great coastal cities, prior coastal cities, which may well have been advanced. And depending on how this cataclysm, how deep into this possible cataclysm you want to dive, that's where Doug Vogt gets into, like, some of that stuff. And if you want to read there's a book called that the CIA classified. This is crazy. This is really crazy. Because it just adds a whole weird chapter to this. There was a book by this guy, Chan, I forget his name. It's Chan Thomas, that's what it is. His guy's name was Chan Thomas. And he wrote a book called The Adam and Eve Story. And it's not a biblical thing or anything like that, okay? It's a story about the destruction, the cataclysm of the earth. And I've read that on this show, a couple of times. And let me see if I wasn't, I never know when with these flow of consciousness type of things, I never know where I'm going to go. Let me see if I have the, let me just do a search here with Adam and see if I can get this Adam and Eve story. I think I might have like a screen capture of it. I'm using a Mac computer, and Mac search is worse, though Google search has pretty well become somewhat useless at this point. There it was. Okay, it's somewhere here. Adam and Eve CD. I'm not sure if PDFs show up on this. Let me see. Come on. I see it, but I can't link on it. Now I'm saying all formats, but it doesn't accept PDF on this one. All right, hang in there. I want to show you this. I'm just going to have to do it a different way. All right. All right, let's see here. Because you got to get, I want to give you into this, how weird this is. Yeah, Adam and Eve CIA. Now, is this the PDF document or is it just one page? Page is 1. Page is 57. Okay, good. I have to open a PDF document here. Just take a second. I'm going to have to screen capture this first page. This says declassified in part, sanitized copy approved for release. This is a CIA document. All right. And you will see that on this. I just screen captured it. Come on. My mouse. I missed it. My mouse has decided to act up. Whenever you do something live, it's like dust or something in my mouse. So now I have to go about this in a half-assed way. Just bear with me. I'm just going to take this. I have to copy and paste it into a document so I could bring it up for you. And I could save it. And show Redux. We'll save it as a JPEG file. So it's not too big. And we'll call it Adam Eve. CIA. Save. Quit. Here. Properties, browse, Adam Eve, CIA, open, okay, let's look. All right. Now, as you can see here, this says declassified in part, approved for release. This was in 2013 they released this. CIA and some kind of weird number. All right. And the same thing's on the bottom. I'm going to enlarge it a little bit bigger. Okay. So we can see it. Now, this is why I was saying, let me just do a little bit of.
Tape deck alert. Tape deck alert.
All right. With a rumble so low as to be inaudible, growing, throbbing, then fuming into a thundering roar, the earthquake starts. Only it's not any earthquake in recorded history. In California, the mountains shake like ferns in a breeze. The mighty Pacific rears back and piles up into a mountain of water more than 2 miles high, then starts its race eastward. With the force of 1,000 armies, the wind attacks, ripping, shredding everything in its supersonic bombardment. The unbelievable mountain of Pacific seawater follows the wind eastward, burying Los Angeles and San Francisco as if they were but grains of sand. Nothing but nothing stops the relentless, overwhelming onslaught of wind and ocean. Across the continent, the 1,000-mile-per-hour wind wreaks its unholy vengeance everywhere, mercilessly, unceasingly. Every living thing is ripped into shreds while being blown across the countryside, and the earthquake leaves no place untouched. In many places, the Earth's molten sublayer breaks through and spreads a sea of white-hot liquid fire to add to the Holocaust. Within 3 hours, the fantastic wall of water moves across the continent, burying the wind-ravaged land under 2 miles of seething water coast to coast. In a fraction of a day, all vestiges of civilization are gone, and the great cities Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, New York are nothing but legends. Barely a stone is left where millions walked just a few hours before. A few lucky ones who managed to find shelter from the screaming wind on the lee side of Pikes Peak watch the molten sea of molten fire break through the quaking valleys below. The raging waters follow, piling higher and higher, streaming over the molten earth fire and rising. Why did the CIA classify this? And when it was declassified, there's still parts of it that they have, redacted. Okay? That's why you should go to Ben Davidson's site, suspiciousobservers.org, and watch his series on catastrophe. That's no joke. You could go to CIA.gov and find that. Why did they classify it? And then declassify it, redact it. People don't even know about this thing. People don't understand. They're not teaching about the Younger Dryas period. You know, there's people that live in like New York City that don't know that Central Park and some of those rocks in Central Park and stuff were like dragged by glaciers. You know, like they don't understand this, because after that part, that page, that just took one page out of a 57-page document. After that particular, crazy thing that just will wipe out the United States completely. In other words, there won't be anything left. What they're saying. It's like, in other words, it's like it's going to take a Brillo pad to the country. Because sometimes people say, well, if there was advanced civilizations, thousands of years ago, how come there's no evidence of it? Because there was this cataclysm. As the story goes, the sun ejects its outer shell and causes this ridiculous planetary, insanity. The Earth stops. That's what causes the water. It's like if you were driving down the road in your car, and on your hood you had a pan of water, and then you slammed on the brakes. That water in that pan is just going to like completely shoot out of that pan onto the windshield. Well, imagine what the Pacific Ocean would do if the Earth slams on its brakes, right? And the same, and it's going to likewise cause winds like that. So it's like we see the damage that a hurricane does when you have one of these like Category 4 hurricanes or something. People could almost imagine, so they could imagine 120 mile an hour winds and or tornadoes when they see the damage that a tornado does, and there's nothing left but like toothpicks where a house was. Literally toothpicks. Right? It's like it's scoured. Okay, well imagine a force that's like 10 times stronger than that tornado coming across the continent, like everywhere, sweeping across the entire continent. Continents, by the way. It's not just, this isn't going to hit the U.S. Canada, North America, South America, it's just sweeping the Pacific, it's just sweeping across. The winds first, and then followed by this 2 miles of water. And then because of the displacement in the atmosphere, that the other part of the planet at that time is going to be like baked. And then the atmosphere is going to naturally want to fill that void. And then that's what causes this flash freezing after this effect. So then everything is flash frozen. And, it could be centuries before, or like in the Younger Dryas period, there were like two things. Like this happened 12,000 years ago, but then there was something like, was it 11,600 or 10,600 years? It was like something like 1,400 years, passed before, before the melt. 1,400 years. It's like, that's not comprehensible, And those who survive, what ruins and what areas would be survived, like things like the pyramids and stuff that were built to withstand this sort of thing, right? They were probably built, like I say, 36, maybe 72,000 years ago. And those big granite boxes buried deep beneath the earth, impossible for even modern technology to get them down there into those caverns. They put stuff in there to preserve. The previous civilizations knew this was happening. And so they had put stuff in there, but those lids are opened. So someone took the stuff that was in there out. It's just with the Sphinx. There are caverns in the Sphinx, but they're empty now. And you can, there finally has been video that where people have snuck in there. They got caught, but before they got caught, they were able to stream video out. They just like we were told, years ago, well, people like me who followed this kind of thing, that underneath the pyramid there were caverns and there was like a hall of records or whatever. Well, they found it. The problem is it's empty. Somebody emptied it out. And the Great Pyramid, there is no evidence whatsoever that thing had anything to do with some kind of tomb. It's not a tomb. It's simply not a tomb. Like they like to call it the King's Chamber or the Queen. Those are just names that people put in there. And the dynastic Egyptian period, which didn't rise until, 4,000 years, or so. 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, the Sumerians, dynastic Egyptians, then, yeah, they didn't build those fucking things. And so, this is what we're facing, man. I mean, I hate to be a downer, but you got people out there worrying about CO2, something that greens the planet and gives us oxygen and allows our crops to grow. You got vegans and vegetarians who live on plants who are like joining this cause of like climate crisis, and they don't understand. You get rid of carbon-based fuels, your so-called fossil fuels. Well, I don't know what you're going to eat, but you're going to have to go back to eating meat. And there certainly aren't enough bugs on the planet, to fill the bellies of 8 billion people. The absurdity of that, to heat the northern latitudes, right? Or the southern latitudes when their winter comes. Do you understand how much energy it takes? You don't have battery power. Solar power in the north, ask anybody who has solar power. You don't get the same output you get as you do in the summertime, or if you're in a southern, closer to the equator region or in southern parts. You get something, but not enough to provide heat. Those people, they have wood burning stoves, these homesteaders and stuff like that. Right? Or even propane tanks to cook on. These people who live off the grid, quotation marks. See, if you're going to fearmonger, if you're going to tell some kind of tale, you shouldn't have all these loose ends and these open ends that people can, poke holes in your fear-mongering lies. And when archaeologists will, will just research the Younger Dryas period. I mean, this stuff happened. I mean, nobody argues that. You could go to the most prestigious journals, in the world, and all the academics in the major institutions, and they're all going to admit that, 10,600, 12,000 years ago, there was this, Younger Dryas period. And they also admit that there were these mini ice ages, when the Thames River froze over and people had fires and festivals on it. I mean, even in 1776, if you think about it, Washington, there was, this place was frozen. People don't get it. And then, it's like every time I watch something, there was some flood thing, being shown. There's sometimes YouTube channels that show you this week and what happened on the earth, right? And they'll show you storms and floods and different things like that, like the latest things. Because there's so much footage now, because everybody has a freaking cell phone with a camera on it, right? So, it's like, and this stuff comes up, and I guess there's people that just scan through or, they post stuff on their social media. So the stuff's all available and dated and, it's there. And, and the news media covers it and it ends up on YouTube as a clip, some flood in some place around the world. And they'll say there was a flood in some place in Europe, I noticed, and it said, this was one of the worst floods in many, many years. Well, that's the statement they always say. It's like the storm of the century or whatever, it's like that Johnstown flood, thing, it happened 3 times, one in 1880s, one in the, early part of the 20th century, and then one in the 1970s, late 70s, killed 2,200 people. And at the same time, Time Magazine was saying, are we heading into another ice age, right? This is way before global warming. And in 1880s, people were burning wood stoves and some coal and stuff like that. But that was way before the big buildup of industrialization, anything. I mean, the population, like I try to tell people, the population in the U.S. alone back in like the Civil War era was like 40 million, somewhere in that category. Humans in the early 20th century, the population in the U.S. was only 100-some thousand people, 100-some million. I screw up on that sometimes. 100 million, some million. So we have 330 million now. Populations have increased, almost exponentially. In the 70s, I think it was only a couple 100 million. But the point is, the idea is that these things have happened not in concert with population rise or with the use of cars and industry and heating. Because they'll say, there was a flood like that back in the 1880s. Right? Or there's evidence, or archaeologists will find evidence, there's this whole mud flood thing. That's something you really want to look into. That's like fishy, weird, and it's so hidden that, there's certain people who've like got into that. And I don't know enough about it to get into it, but there's a whole different, that's freaky. You only know, that's why I say you don't know what you don't know, over there. Because there's some crazy stuff going on. In fact, in many cases, everything you know is wrong. But what I'm saying, they'll go back and there'll be evidence of a flood that happened hundreds of years ago, before any industrial revolution or any kind of thing like that. And they, or like I say, they'll say, oh yeah, the temperature was, they'll skip the Dust Bowl, in the 30s, right? And stuff like that. They'll say this is the worst fire in California's history, but there were no one was in California then, except the indigenous peoples who wouldn't have been in the forest. They probably wouldn't be living in the forest area. They were primarily hunter-gatherer types and migrated, with the temperature, they were a mobile civilization, right? They moved, and yeah, and even so, if there were, I've yet to see that, one of the major news companies bring on some chief to say, what do you have in your oral tradition stories of of fires or whatever? But I've actually seen newscasters say that this is the worst fire in history. And I'm going, in whose history? In your 22, some 22-year-old girl with big breasts on the news, right? Got hired for her looks, but she acts as if she's some kind of feminist, and that's not it. It's like, baby, they hired you because you have big breasts and you got the right face, structure that work, that they're looking for. That cracks me up, people like that. Same with guys though, too. Yeah, you got the proper square chin, to be the announcer. And so some square chin or big breasted, announcer, news reader is saying this is the worst thing in history, and they're like 24 years old. You mean in 24 years? Or in your lifetime? Or your parents' lifetime? Or your grandparents' lifetime? Well, guess what? That goes back 100 years at best. So what do you fucking know? Right? History is at least go back to what, these goofball academics will say, like to the Sumerians, go back 6,000 years, or at Hancock, 12,000 years, or Anthony West, who's no longer with us, 36,000 or 72,000 years, or me, who says probably goes back well over hundreds of thousands of years, because these things have occurred cyclically every 12,000 years, these cataclysms. And as far as fires, storms, and floods and all that other stuff, the Noah's flood, right? That flood story, it's it's not a myth. There's flood stories in every culture around the world, which coincides with this thing the CIA was for some reason hiding, right? It reads like chair's uncomfortable. It reads like a fictional, book. But why would they classify a fictional book and then redact certain portions of it? Like I said before, the moon missions were called Apollo, but Apollo was the sun god. They went to the moon not for just the reasons, to test the ICM, to test intercontinental ballistic missiles, rockets for that. That was one of the covers for that. But also because of the space race. But they also went on that mission to see if there were these, like those Mars berries, if you've ever seen those things, and things they found on the Earth that showed that there was some kind of outburst from the sun. And they found that they were on the moon too. And that confirmed it. So now we have confirmation on the moon, Mars, and the Earth that this that the sun does have this nova event. Not a supernova. It's not the destruction of the sun. It's a cyclical nova where the sun just basically like expels this shell. It's like a CMA, and another phrase I hate. It's a CME on steroids. I hate that term, but it's like, what the heck? You got to say things. But anyway, I think I gave you an earful, and this show has nothing to do with Godzilla. Anyway, if you are celebrating Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. Otherwise, happy holidays to everyone. It's the holiday season, and don't forget to go to ROCKFLUX.com and support this channel by getting a shirt, a hoodie, and there's links to great solar stuff and my book on Amazon, Then What? Get the print version, because there's a reason why you want the print version, because there's stuff in there you can write on and copy and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Good morning.